Good morning, and welcome to the Appleton Museum of Art. We're in Ocala, Florida, and my name is Marie, and we're going to do a winter painting. We're going to do a barn in the snow. It's just a very simple painting, and you can add to it. You can put an additional fence in there. You can add as many trees. So I'm going to give you the basics, and then you can go from there. First thing you need to do is to draw the barn. I have a very simple drawing. Where you decide to put this on your canvas is totally up to you. And I have put mine on here. All right. So I'm going to do this fairly dark, but what you're doing basically is a triangle top. One side of the barn is going to be longer than the other because you're going to put this on a hill. So where you put this on your canvas is totally up to you. You also want to add a little bit down from that corner of the barn, of the roof. You want to add that attachment, and it's just simply a rectangle. This would be the roof. And when we do paint this, it's not going to be, because it's going to be an old barn, it does not have to be a straight line. Okay. And then you would bring down, and actually, I'm going to make another line in here. And I'll show you on mine. I have my barn. Here's the side of the barn. This side of the barn. And that extension. I do have the outline of a tree, but don't worry about that. And I want this to be on a hill, so I'm drawing this line. And how wavy or whatever, that again is up to you. This is all going to be snow. And eventually we will put a fence in. We are going to put in some trees. I do have a window, just drawn a little bit crazy there. This, when you do paint this is going to be a double line for the roof. You don't have to draw that now. We can just paint that in, but this is your basic outline of your barn. We will put some details in across here. I'm not going to bother with that right now. We'll do that with paint. Where you place this on your canvas, again, if you want a lot of sky, we move the barn down. If you want less sky, more snow here in your foreground, move it up. Totally up to you. The palette that we use for our acrylics is just a basic primary colors. And I'm going to move this here so you can actually see. I've got primary colors and black and white. And that's what we use here to teach all our classes, even our children's classes. We want to teach them that you can create usually whatever colors that you want with that basic palette. And so that's exactly what we use. Today, you're going to be using a lot of white, a little bit of black, and your primary colors, so you can make some greens and oranges if you want it. But mostly we're going to stick to some blues and some reds and some greens. So what I'd like to do is get started. And I'm going to get started up in the sky. I'm going to use a flat brush. I use a lot of flat brushes when I paint. I find them very easy to use because I can paint with them flat. But if you hold it directly straight up and down, you can get a nice edge on that too. So I am going to start by painting in my sky with white, just a plain white initially. Okay. And I'm going to go around my barn. See, with a flat brush, you can drag that, or you can hold it straight up. and go along that edge. I'm just going to, like I said, paint this entire sky in. I'm going to add just a touch of water because I don't want this to dry too fast. And acrylic will dry fast, especially if it's thin. I'm giving this a little bit thicker coat of paint because I want to blend colors into this in a minute. I'm not so concerned about coming down the sides here because I am going to put trees in here. So I'm not so worried about getting that white paint down there. So I've got my sky right now with white. Now, if you want to make a cloudy sky, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some blue. I'm going to take a tiny bit of black. I'm going to get myself another paintbrush here. And I'm going to mix up, take a tiny bit of that and mix up a blue. Now, if you want a sunset, you could mix up a little bit of a pink, and I'll do a little of that. I'm going to take a little more here. And you can start painting in. Now, when I do this, I'm going to paint almost all of this. But I'm also going to take what I like to use, a dry brush. And with a dry brush, I can do a lot of blending. And I keep wiping that brush off so I can blend. Put this down. See, with a dry brush, I will blend my sky. I'm just going to do long strokes. If you don't like your sky this dark, you go back and, add some more white to this. It does look like a bit of a cloudy day. And actually, I kind of like this dark area up in here and this little bit of white. So I'm going to leave that. Like I said, every time I use my dry brush, I wipe that off. And I'm just doing this very gently across here. So I do have a cloudy day here. If you did want to add, let's say a bit of a sunset, I could possibly add that in here. So I could, I'm going to take that, I'm going to add a touch of red. I'm going to mix up a little bit of a purple, but I'm going to take some more white in here. Maybe a little more red. Okay, so I have mixed up a little bit, and let's say right along the top edge of the barn, I'm going to put a little bit of that purple in here. So it's going to be a little bit of a sunset or an evening sky. Now, some of this is going to have a tree in here, but let's put a little bit more up in here. Let me take a little bit. And because my sky, I want to paint in the direction that I'm seeing my sky. And so I'm going to go horizontally across with my brush. That's as much pink as I want. You could add more to that if you wanted to. But right now, I am kind of liking what I've got here. But I am also going to take my dry brush and just kind of smooth that out. Now, if you want to brighten up your sky, you need to add some pure white to that. Then the nice thing about the acrylics is even if you finish this painting and you decide that I really want to change that sky, it is very easy to go back over that dry paint and change the look of this painting completely. You could make this a much sunnier day. You could make it a more evening sky. That's the fun part about acrylics. Okay. I'm not worried about this because I'm going to paint over that in some brown, that edge of the roof on the barn. We are going to paint a lot of white down here, but I'm not going to do that right now. I want to show you how to put the trees in. So I'm going to leave that sky the way it is. And this is basically my white. This is my dry brush. So I'm going to keep this as my dry brush. Whenever you're using acrylics, if you're not going to be using this color again, which I'm not, I am going to rinse this out. You don't want to leave your brushes out to dry with acrylic paint in them because they will ruin your brushes. Acrylic paint will dry hard like a plastic. And once it's hardened in your brush, it's not ever going to come out. So I always have my dish of water and I'm just going to let that brush soak for a little bit. I'm going to take an extra piece of paper and show you how we're going to do a tree before I do it on here. So I'm going to move this a little bit. And I'm going to take a smaller flat brush. And let's see, I'm going to take, this one's good. I'm going to mix up a brown, well, almost a black. So I'm going to take a little bit of black right here. And let's see. Actually, I'm going to take a little bit of blue. Yellow. And some red. I want to mix up a brown. Now this looks a little bit, actually, I like that green, which I'll probably use that. Take a little more red to that green. Red and green is going to give me a brown. Take some of that brown and add some black to it. So I want a dark, really dark brown. To do your pine trees, basically you're going to start holding your paintbrush almost perfectly straight up, and you're just going to go back and forth. Smaller at the top, pine trees get wider as they go down. And that's all you want to do right now. So I'm going to do that on my canvas here. And all right, so I'm going to start with a little bit And I'm just going to, I'm going to bring it all the way down. And this brush is a little bit too thick for me. I'm going to get a smaller one. And I'm going to do one over here. Actually, let's do a little bit. Okay. I'm going to start to have one partially behind my barn. So it's going to come down. So I'm just seeing a little bit of that. And then I'm going to do a shorter one. And you're just basically going back and forth. What you're going to do now is take a little bit of that green. If you, and I've wet my paintbrush down. I'm going to take some of that green and some of that brown. I want to make it more of an olive green. And what you're going to do is just kind of go in here and you're filling in that space. Maybe make that a little bit darker. Just with like little taps. You want it to look kind of a little bit fuzzy, especially when you get out to the edge. So you're just doing a little bit of taps. In here. Now I'm filling in with some green. So you're still seeing some of that, the brown in there. Remember, we're going to put snow on this. Mix up a little bit more here. Black and green, excuse me, black and yellow. Just taking a simple black and yellow will give you a very nice green also. Okay, so I'm going to come over here and just up and down. Almost, you're not using this really flat, but you're not straight up and down. You're more like at an angle. And you want it looking a little bit fuzzy. So you're not putting a lot of solid paint in here. Because again, we are going to add snow. Up here, I'm going to use my brush a little bit there, straight up and down. My paint is getting a little dry, so I would add a touch of water to loosen that up. I'm going to let that dry a little bit, and then we can go back and put the snow on that later. Okay. I am going to move down here because I want to put the snow in here. And I want to give this a chance to dry so I can paint a fence and I can paint a tree on top of that without any problems mixing in with the white. So what I'm going to do right now is paint the snow in down here. So again, this is going to go back in the water. And I'm going to paint my foreground in here. And I'm going to paint. Again, I am going to start with white. Just a pure white. Whoops, this does have a little bit of blue in it. Oh, that's okay. And I do want this to look a little thick. Okay. Want it. So I am going to give this a whole layer of white. Just like we did. Now, if you want to leave some of those little ridges, absolutely, because it will give that painting a textured look. Yes, it'll take a little bit longer to dry, but it also can be really kind of neat looking. So I am going to smooth that out though a little bit. So I've just painted all of that in a pure white to give that illusion of, the cold, of the snow. We do add a little bit of blue to this. And I'm going to go back to that little spot up here. I'm going to add some water to loosen that up. I will add more white paint to that. Okay. You want to kind of think, these are the tops. This is maybe some snow drifts. So I want to leave that more of a brighter white. But as I come down the hill, so maybe I want to add a little more blue in here. And I'm going to add, I don't want to get too dark. But I am going to add a little bit stronger blue in here. Now this is where I'm going to go back to my dry brush in a minute to blend this. So again, take my dry brush. And I want to blend this in. Now, you can try all kinds of different things with this. I can see a lot of my brush strokes, and I'm not really all that happy with that. What you can do, I'm actually going to take a piece of paper and crumple this up. Okay, and I'm going to open this up now. And you can do it with paper. You can, if you have a sponge. I'm just going to kind of blot that. And what I'm also giving to my snow is some texture. Now, if you don't like that, you just, go back over that. that's the nice thing about acrylics is you can just keep painting over and over until you get it the way you want it. I want this to be a little bit brighter white up here and along the edge of the barn here. So I am going to go back and take some pure white and come back over here. Now, the thing is, I probably, when this is dry, I probably will again put some pure white on the top here. It's hard to add that right now because it's blending in with the blue. I want this hill to be kind of white, bright white. And as it comes down the hill, the top of the snow here is going to be a bright white. And this is going to get darker down here. And you're going to find, I am finding this paint is already drying a bit. So as I'm going across here, I can tell this is already drying. You can always add a touch of water and just lightly drag. Right now, I'm going to leave this. And yes, now we're going to go back to the barn. I usually end up using an awful lot of paintbrushes. So I start with containers of brushes that I can just pull, mostly flat brushes. So right now, we're going to mix up a red for the barn. And so I'm going to just take my red. And I want a little bit of black. Just a tiny bit of black. And I'm going to mix that up. You can use a paintbrush to mix your colors. I do have these palette knives, so I'm using palette knife. I want to dull this red down a bit. So that's why I am adding black to it. A little too dark. So I'm going to add some more red to this. You just want to give it a look to it. Okay. I think that's good. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to hold my brush straight up and down and go along this edge of my barn. I'm going along the edge of the roof. Now, if you wanted that window in here, you need to paint around that window. There we go. Make that even a little bit brighter. Okay, so then just kind of drag your brush and paint that barn in. I'm going to paint this whole shape in. And then we'll make it older looking in a minute with some black lines. Paint all in one direction. So I'm consistent as it dries, so I don't see all of those brush strokes going different ways. Okay. And you want to do the same for the extension on that barn. I'm going to go along the roof. And because it's an old barn, it's not going to be a perfectly straight roof. So I do like the way this is sloping. And we'll go back and touch that up with some really bright white snow later on. Want to get the roof, the outline of the roof painted in here, and the roof painted in here. Now that's going to be a brown. So I am going to use some of this red that I've got. I'm going to bring it back down here. I'm going to add a little bit of yellow and a little bit of blue, because the three of them together will give you a brown. And as you're working on this, okay, there's a little, this looks a little bit green. So I'm going to scoop up more of that red. Red and green make brown. Orange and blue make brown. Now, if you want this a little bit darker, and I am going to make it a little bit darker, I am going to add a touch of black. Not a lot, just a little bit, because I do want it kind of dark. So your primary colors, if you mix the three primary colors together, you will get brown. Red and blue are very strong, so, start easy with those. Okay, that's a pretty good brown. So I'm going to leave that red brush here. I want to get another flat brush. I'm going to get a small flat brush. And holding it straight up and down, I'm going to outline the roof of the larger portion of the. A little too much paint on that. So straight up and down, I want to get. Okay, there's my top of my barn. Now I'm going to paint in. And again, This is an old barn, so my roof is not going to be perfectly straight. I'm just going to curve that down. Now I can paint that in. And I'll go along the edge here also. You can do so many things with a flat brush. There, I've got a really sloping roof here on my barn. And I noticed, I didn't realize I had left some space here. I may go back and make this tree just a little bit thicker. I'm not going to do that right now. I just want to work on this. So my paint is drying here. What you're going to do, let me get that drawing of the barn. And just let me move this here. What we're going to do is make this barn look older now. And we're going to take, you can use the brown, you can add, I'm going to add a little black to that to make it darker. I want to make this look older. So I'm going to come across here with almost just a wavy line, something like that. And then I'm going to start putting in with the boards. Okay, I need to make them, so I'm going to make them darker so you can see. I'm going to put in lines to make this look older. Now, I'm not going to put every single line across there because I want it to look old and I don't want it to really look fake. So we'll put this line in first and then we will add some lines for the individual boards. And you're going to do the same thing down here. They do not have to match the ones above, and you don't have to make complete boards each time. Okay, and we will do the same down here. You're going to make lines for the boards in the barn. And some of these, and I'll do it up here, like some of these, I may even, paint a little bit thicker as if there's a hole there, because it is an old barn. So to make it look a little bit more rustic, you can paint some wider spaces. So let's move this. Okay. And I'm going to take a round brush to do this one, to make the line across here. So I'm going to take a little bit of black. So I'm going to use this brown, but I want to make it a little bit darker. So if you've got a lot of paint on a round brush, just kind of twirl it and get it to a nice little point there. Okay. So where the rooftop ends, that is where you want to make like a little line across here. And I'm going to thin that out. And I'm going to hold my brush straight up and down. And I want to make just a little bit of a line here. It's more of it's almost like a broken line. I know it is hard for you to see this, but it is more of a broken line, as going across here. Thin that out again. So now I want to put some lines. And I don't, like I said, I don't want to make them even. I don't want to make them all the same. Now, if you're having trouble with your round brush, these are kind of thick. I am going to go back again and get a flat brush. Yes, I am going to stick with a round brush. If I hold my brush almost straight up and down, I can drag this. And if you don't get a solid line because you don't have enough paint on your brush, that's actually even better. It's going to give the illusion of a more rustic, broken line or a board. So I'm going to start at the top, but I'm not going to drag that all the way down. I'm going to skip a space and maybe this one I'll start in the middle. See, I can see got some of those lines in there. If you're finding that you don't have a brush thin enough that you want to get those lines, then you know what? Wait till the paint is dry. Get a very thin Sharpie, an extra fine Sharpie pen, and you can do the lines with a pen, which a lot of times I will do because I do like to use a pen and add little details in. So I'm going to do the same thing down here. And actually, I'm going to make a really big black space here because I want it to look like there's a really broken board in here and a hole. So you're making random lines here. All across your barn. That a little bit darker. From this line that goes across here, I'm going to come up as if there's a little hole here. So I'm just going to come up and make a little space so it looks like there's a broken board. Water. Water will help thin out your paint. And if you kind of, like I said, if you kind of drag it around, usually you can get a nice thin point on that. If you hold it straight up and down, you get a nice fine line. This part is going to take you a little time because you've got all of this. Just going to twirl that brush so I can get a nice point on my brush. Notice I'm going to paint more of this in here. I am going to come down here. I haven't quite finished the barn. but I can always go back and add the rest of the lines in there. But I want to go down the bottom here because I want to make sure we get through this. Now, when I was doing mine, and I'm going to bring this over here, I want my fence just to kind of go down and almost like it's broken. So I'm going to start higher up on the side here on the right-hand side, and I'm just going to go down. And I'm going to paint my vertical posts first. And since I have all of this brown mixed up, I'm going to use my flat brush. And I'm going to start right here. Make it a little bit thicker here. I'm going to start going downhill. And as I'm going downhill, mine are not going to be standing up so straight anymore. And I think, it depends on obviously, how big you want your fence, how long you want your fence. Make these a little bit thicker. I want to get some of that paint off because I want a thinner line going across. So take some of that paint off. And holding my brush straight up and down, I'm going to paint in the railings on that. Little touch of water to that. Hold that straight up and down. Okay. You can go back and fix these, make them more squared off if they're not as squared off as you like them, or if you want to make them thicker. Now I'm going to go and add a little bit of shading down here because I really want them to look like they are in the snow. So I am going to take, let's see, one of my smaller flat brushes. Make sure I clean that off. I'm going to add a little bit of white paint to the tops of my fence posts. So I want to add just a touch as if there's been some snow. There we go. Just add a little bit to the tops. And if you can add a little tiny bit on those railings too, if you want to, because there would have been some snow that would settle on the tops. Now I want to take a little bit of blue. I want to make a little bit of a shadow down here. So I want a little bit of black. Be careful when you add the black, though. It just changes it so fast. And touch more. You just want to get it kind of cloudy. Like a gray, bluish gray. I just want to add where that is in the ground. I'm just going to add a little bit. But here again is where I like to use a little bit of a dry brush. Okay, this is really dry, so I cannot blend that. So I'm going to add this in here first, that little bit of a shadow, as if it's in the ground. Okay. And then I'm going to take some pure white and add this in. And then I can take my dry brush and kind of blend those two together. Just want to give the illusion that they are sunken into the ground. I'll add a little bit more here, that gray. You know, you're going to find that you keep going back and forth, adding a little bit more white or a little bit more gray until you get it the way you want that to look. I want a little bit of a shadow, but I don't want it to look really too dark. So I want this to look like, yes, that is sunk into the ground, but I don't want it too obvious. Just a little bit of a shadow. So keep adding a little bit of gray, a little bit of white, and blend those. I left myself some space over here because I think I am going to add a little tree over here. If you don't want to do that, you could actually add another, another part of a fence coming down if you wanted to. Since we're working with the snow here, let's go back and make our trees snowy. And before I do that, I have to fill in that little spot that I accidentally left here. I am going to have to mix up a green. Take some of that brown. Just going to tap some of this in here. Maybe there's another tree. I've got to fill that in a little bit. You can use a flat brush for this. You could use a round brush for adding the snow on this. I prefer a flat brush or what's called a filbert. Okay, a flat brush is basically squared off. A filbert has got that rounded tip to it. And you can see the difference here. A filbert can be a really nice paintbrush for an assortment of things. In this case, I'm going to use it to put the snow on the trees because I want, but I'll show you how to use a regular flat brush as well, because you can do the same thing. You know what? Let's get that. Okay, I'm just going to show you here with a flat brush. Again, I am going to use this more at an angle, not straight up, not completely flat. And I just want to touch, oops, make sure I got enough on here. I just want to touch the tips of this. I know that's hard to see, maybe. I want to just touch the tips of the green here. I know it's hard to see on that, so, So I'm going to take some on the tip of my flat brush, okay? And I just want to touch. You're just doing little touches. And kind of try and imagine where those branches kind of went back and forth, okay? So you still want to see some of that green. You still want to see some of the brown. I'm going to use the filbert on this one too. The filbert kind of gives you a little bit of a rounded. A little bit of. You want this tree just to look like it's this very gentle touch of snow. It just on there. You can also, we're going to come over here and just gentle touches of snow. Now, what I'm actually doing is I can still see a little bit of my sky through here. So where I can see sky is actually also where I'm filling in with the touches of white paint, because then I can still see brown, I can still see green. So my white is filling in here. Put a little more white up here. The top of that tree. And just, you have to be just really very gentle and use the white paint sparingly. You can give it one layer and then you can also go back, you know, if you find that you want to add more snow to that tree. At this point also, we can add some snow to the edge of the, you know, I can just kind of drag a little bit of snow on the top of my barn. little too thick. Okay. And I could put some down here. Just a few little touches of snow on here. Well, since I've got white, I'm going to go back and really highlight the top of my my snow drifts up here. And this is where if I want to add some thickness, I want to leave that thicker. You know, you could do that because most of your work is done up here. So I'm going to put some more white, just some pure white up here. See, this is the nice part about the acrylic because this is dry and you can kind of keep playing with this. And if you, again, if you don't like that sky, you can still go back and brighten that up or change that up. I'm going to fix the edge of this because I don't like the way that looks. This dries, I'll go back and I'll add a little bit of snow to that. Okay. I still need to go back and add some lines in here, and I still need to add more lines in here. Again, if you feel that you're more comfortable using that Sharpie marker, you can get some really fine lines and make the details in the barn much nicer than maybe using a paintbrush. Okay, over here, if you wanted to, you could add just a small little winter tree. It's just something else that you can put in this area. Or like I said, if you wanted to, you can put an additional fence in here. I am going to put a little tree. I've got my brown paint and I'm going to find one of my round brushes, the really small round. And I'm going to take a little bit of that brown paint again. I'm going to roll this until I get a nice point on that. The window, all right, my window is not vertical. So since I've got the brown on here, I am going to paint. Let me get some more on here. I am going to paint that window. And I'm going to paint this solid dark. You can use black. You could use brown. I'm going to let this dry. So I'm going to leave that right now because then I will go back and I will outline it with white. So it shows up. So I'm just going to paint this rectangle. This will take no time to dry. I'm glad somebody reminded me. I totally forgot about that. Okay, so while that's drying, I am going to come down here and I'm going to paint. I'm going to start with the trunk of the tree. Kind of like this spot, maybe right in here. Hold your paintbrush almost straight up and down and get a little more paint on here. I want to start very, very thin. And I'm just going to kind of come out. I don't care if that's not a solid line right now. I'm just giving the illusion of a tree. I can always go back and paint that in thicker. My trunk is going to come up and I'm going to go this way. It's just a little bit of a wavy line. Again, I'm going to come back down my trunk and I'm going to go. So I've got, let's say these are my major branches. I'm going to just come out with some very thin lines now. You hold it straight up and down. I'm having a little trouble getting this to be really thin. And if they don't all really connect, I wouldn't worry about it. I'm not making this tree all of that tall, but I am going to bring it up. Maybe it might come over part of my barn here. Now it's just, kind of randomly adding smaller little branches. Little tiny shoots off of this. Picking up a couple of these. Picking up this trunk a little bit too. I'm constantly using water and then twirling my brush around to get a thin tip on that. Make those branches, thicker if you want to. Um, you can go back also and add a little bit of snow on these. If I want to just add a little bit of snow here and there, that might have settled on that tree. And I want to not make this so stark. Add little dabs of snow here and there where you think as the snow comes down, it almost looks like it's frosting branches. I think I want to make that tree look a little bit stronger. Down a little bit more. Then I'm going to bring this up more. I'm also going to come, same thing I did down here. I also want to kind of blend this tree. So I'm going to pick up some of the blues and grays that, you've got on your palette here. And kind of blend that into the ground. I'm not sure how much more I want to add to that little tree. But my window is dry, so I'm going to get some white on that round brush and twirl it really thin. Because all I'm going to do is I'm going to outline the window so it shows up. And again, this is an old barn. Shouldn't be perfectly straight. just so you can see that old window in there. And then if you want to touch up any of that snow, you know, on the top of your barn. Right about now, the only thing that I need to do, I need to add some more lines in my barn to make all the little the boards and kind of finish that up. And I'm going to go back and work on the top of my barn here. And every once in a while, I notice the white paint. Sometimes you need to go back and kind of touch that up because it starts to blend in. I can't think of, actually, right now, I can't think of anything else that we need to add, except I need to finish that. Well, I hope you have enjoyed this. Don't forget to sign your painting, okay? And I really thank you very much for joining us here at the Appleton Museum of Art in Ocala, Florida.